like to take this moment to say that there are a multitude of government planning issues taking place at this time, and I'm asking for all of our citizens to have patience with the process. And if you have questions, to reach out to your town council and not just react to every item and opinion you find on social media. It is my opinion you'll find the truth to be more comforting and informative. On another topic, the Jackson Kiwanis are partnering with the Whitesville Volunteer Fire Department to pick up donated foodstuffs and new personal items to help restock the Jackson Food Pantry. If you'd like to make a donation, please contact the Kiwanis. The pickup will take place in the Whitesville area on the Saturday, May 23rd in the afternoon. If all goes well, they are also looking to partner with the remaining volunteer fire departments in turn to continue the program. So if you'd like to see a nice big loud fire truck on your street, give them a shout, they'll come pick up. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Kern?
Thank you. I'd like to just reach out again to the residents of Jackson. If you, another family that you know, somebody else that you know needs assistance getting food, getting additional items through this, during this shelter in place and this situation, please reach out to any of the members of council via email, and we will help connect you to the organizations that are out there, as Councilman Fleming said, that are out there right now working to assist all the residents of the town. With that, thank you very much.
Thank you. Council Vice President Sawicki.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Again, thanks to everyone who's joining tonight. We realize that joining by Zoom can be a little bit of a trouble. We certainly rather have everybody here. We're hoping that everything's coming through okay. As I mentioned at a meeting last week, we've done some upgrades to the audio visual to help with that. If you missed it last week, Council President Barry Calogero resigned. If you did miss it, he wished everyone well and thanked all the residents for the support. With that, I'd mentioned at last week's meeting that Council is accepting resumes for appointment to Council President Calagero's position. Those resumes need to be in by this Friday, May 15th. Council will work diligently to ensure we find the best candidate to represent Jackson, but also swiftly to ensure that we do have a full council, again, to represent the residents of the town. The other thing I wanted to mention, the mayor, who typically sits in on these meetings with us, for those that have been on, have heard that sporadically he's had to attend calls with the governor. He happens to be doing that now, but asked me to read a statement in his absence. So this is a statement from Mayor Michael Rena. It is certainly no secret that I believe Governor Murphy has gone too far with certain aspects of his executive orders. By law, the township cannot override these orders as much as we may wish to do so. However, in one area, municipalities such as Jackson Township have certain authority, and that is over our parks and recreation facilities. In that regard, the township will immediately permit the use of township recreation facilities for various teams, provided they comply with the social distancing guidelines and limit the number of participants to no more than 10 individuals. Parents or guests must remain in their vehicles or leave the facility during such activities. These fields will be permitted to be utilized by soccer, lacrosse, baseball, football, and softball coaches and their teams, provided there are no game simulated scrimmaging or contact drills, no camps or training clinics or league games, and no spectators permitted on the fields, sidelines, or bleachers. Basketball and tennis courts may be utilized, however, no basketball games will be permitted. I recognize that sporting teams often contain more than 8 or 9 players along with the coach, and for this reason, teams may have to divide their rosters to participate in the manner until such time as the governor lifts further restrictions pursuant to his executive orders. As the weather improves, our children need to be provided with recreational facilities to meet their needs while ensuring their health and safety. For this reason, I want to make sure that all Jackson residents are aware that our fields and facilities may be utilized in accordance with the guidelines. Again, that's from Mayor Reno. Other than that, thank you again for joining tonight, and we can continue.
That's why, President, I could just identify two brief items.
Sure.
With regard to the recreation, please process the permits and reach out to recreation. The permitting process remains in place, so it's imperative that flows through the recreation area, recreation department, and the appropriate permitting is done. So thank you very much for that. And if I may, just a brief housekeeping item.
Sure.
As far as the public portion, there are two public portions on the agenda. One is the public portion for resolutions only, and the other is a public comment on any topic. Both events will have the chat function open, so I wanted to make sure that folks, if they see that the chat is disabled, the chat will be enabled for the portion of public comment for resolutions only, and the following area of public comment for any topic. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Appreciate it. Madam Clerk?
Thank you. We'll continue with a motion to approve executive session meeting minutes of April 28th, 2020.
Can I get a motion?
Second.
Roll
Thank you.
call, please.
Councilman Bressi,
Yes.
Councilman Fleming,
Yes.
Councilman Kern,
Yes.
Council Vice President Sawicki.
Yes.
We have no ordinances for second reading, but we do have two ordinances for first reading. Ordinance 5-20 is an ordinance of the Township of Jackson, County of Ocean, State of New Jersey, repealing ordinance 03-17 of the Township Code of the Township of Jackson. Motion to approve ordinance 5-20 on first reading. Advertise the notice of approval and public hearing scheduled for May 26, 2020.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilman Bressi,
Abstain.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
he said abstain.
Abstain? Okay.
Councilman Fleming,
Yes.
Councilman Kern,
Yes.
Council Vice President Sawicki.
And, Attorney McGuckin, can I just get a clarification on the abstention? What does that count as? With the majority. Okay, thank you. Yes.
Thank you. Ordinance 6-20 is an ordinance of the Township of Jackson, County of Ocean, State of New Jersey, repealing ordinance 4-17 of the Township Code of the Township of Jackson. Motion to approve ordinance 6-20 on first reading. Advertise the notice of approval and public hearing scheduled for May 26, 2020.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilman Bressi,
Abstain.
Councilman Fleming,
Yes.
Councilman Kern,
Yes.
Council Vice President Sawicki.
Yes.
Thank you. At this time, we will have public comment on resolutions only. Anyone wishing to speak on resolutions may do so at this time. Please enable the chat function on the Zoom meeting in order to have your comments recorded.
Okay, folks, we're just going to give it a little bit, given the technology. We just want to make sure that we're opening it enough for any comments.
Correct. Just to clarify, this public comment period is for resolutions only. There will be a second public comment period for any topic, and just by way of information, I'm going to be referring back to any of the comments that may be more appropriately in the any topic portion. So we'll try not to miss any of the comments at all. So don't worry about that. But this particular public comment period is for resolutions only, which I think is only resolutions for
There's a
and I'm sorry, the consent agenda as well.
short.
Thank you for the mic comment. I appreciate that.
Any other comments regarding resolutions or consent agenda?
No public comments on the resolutions or on the consent agenda. And based on feedback, we want to just speak very clearly into the microphone to improve the sound quality. Thank you.
So nothing on either?
No, sir.
Okay, can I get a motion to close?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Resolution 208R-20 is a resolution of the Township of Jackson, County of Ocean, State of New Jersey, authorizing release of cash maintenance bond posted by Robert Lewis of Express Systems, Block 2202, Lot 1, 623 Herman Road.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilman Bressi,
Yes.
Councilman Fleming,
Yes.
Councilman Kern,
Yes.
Council Vice President Zwicky.
Yes.
May I have a motion for bills and claims?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilman Bressi,
Yes.
Councilman Fleming,
Yes.
Councilman Kern,
Yes.
Council Vice President Zwicky.
Yes.
Moving to the consent agenda, which is one vote for all of these resolutions. 209R-20, approved Township Council meeting minutes for April 28, 2020. 210R-20, authorized change to custodian of petty cash funds for the Department of Public Works from Fred Reshevitz to Robert Stauffer. 211R-20, authorized member participation in the Sourcewell Cooperative Purchasing Group for calendar year 2020. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilman Bressi,
Yes.
Councilman Fleming,
Yes.
Councilman Kern,
Yes.
Council Vice President Zwicky.
Yes.
Thank you. We will now open public comment on any topic. If you wish to speak on any topic or address the council, please do so at this time by enabling the chat function.
If I may, for the folks that are listening, can someone refer to the chat to let me know if you can hear me clearly? Okay, thank you. So what I'd like to do with your permission, I want to refer back to the top of the chat to ensure that we're capturing all of the questions and comments to the greatest extent possible. So if you've already input a question, you don't need to, you can if you wish, but you don't need to input it again because I'm going to start at the top. So just bear with us as we try to capture all of the chat questions for the governing body. The first question is from Charles. Question is, why are they repealing the ordinances?
Okay, so the ordinance is being repealed tonight from a legislative standpoint are redundant. I'll ask the attorney to explain the details in a minute, but with them being redundant, that means whether the ordinance is there or not, the same type of procedures need to be followed. But I'll have Attorney McGuckin explain the details of that.
Mr. McGuckin, if you could just ensure that your mic is on.
Yeah, if you could just make sure you're close to it.
Thank you. Ordinance 04-17 banned dormitories anywhere in the municipality as a permitted use. That ordinance was redundant as they were not a permitted use in the first place. Ordinance 03-17 eliminated certain zoning districts from permitting schools. That this ordinance puts the ordinances back to the way they were in 2017 with respect to certain zoning districts. It does not affect the R1 zone, but the R2, R3, R5, the multifamily, et cetera.
Mr. McGuckin, I apologize. There's some responses that are indicating they can't hear you as well as they would like. So you could just speak.
I'll try this a little bit better.
Thank you.
Ordinance 04-17 was essentially a redundance ordinance because it prohibited something that was already not permitted in the municipality. So if that ordinance is adopted, it simply leaves it the way it was, which was not permitted in the municipality previously. Ordinance 0403-17 prohibits schools in certain zoning districts in the municipality. This ordinance replaces those and puts it back to the way it was in 2017, exactly as it was. It does not affect the R1 zone or the school where the Oros litigation was.
Next item is from Lisa Dansky. Comment is, I would like it to be known that as a resident of Jackson since 1978, I fully oppose you reversing these ordinances. Next comment, from Denise Garner is, Councilman Sawicki, what is meant by your statement that there is redundancy in our land use laws, question mark? Can you please cite your findings for the public, question mark? And lastly, what will be the definition of I'll read it. What would be the definition of a dormitory within our township? I have the general definition of that noun. Please see what I have written. Noun, a large bedroom for a number of people in a school or institution. Quote, he visited the boarders in their dormitory, close quote. North American, a university or college, hall of residence or hostel. British, denoting a small town or suburb providing a residential area for those who work in a nearby city, a dormitory town. Synonyms, residential, commuter, bedroom, exurban. Thank you.
Great, and thank you for the question. And I apologize to anybody if you feel certain questions were asked and answered. There may be overlapping questions as we read them versus what we've responded. But with respect to the question around redundancy, I think you heard Attorney McGuckin state, for example, whether the original ordinance is in place or not, the dormitory, as an example, is not permitted use. It does need to go before a land use board either way. So that's what I mean by redundant. It doesn't have an effect to change the process in any way. It's not permitted. It does need to go before a land use board to be reviewed and approved before it can move forward. With respect to the definition, maybe Attorney McGuckin, you could take that one. The definition around dormitory.
The definition was included in the original ordinance, but again, it's being eliminated. It was already not a permitted use, so there was no definition. There still is no definition. Dormitories are not a permitted use, even assuming ordinance 06-20 is adopted on second reading.
Next item is from Donovan. Why are you repealing ordinances that are supported by all? As a statement. Next item. I don't know if that's a question or a statement. There's no question mark. But why are you repealing ordinances that are supported by all? That's a comment. Next, Joe Krakowski. I would rather my taxes go up and keep these ordinances in place. Ken Gandaro, I believe. I'm sorry. Yeah, Ken Gandaro. Statement. It's a sad day in Jackson. Joe, no last name. Why are you ignoring our comments? I think that was previous to noting that we were coming back up. Right. Peter Vicinio, comment. This is ridiculous. Kimberly, this meeting is a joke. Most residents are unable to understand what is being spoken. I hope that we've addressed that by ensuring that the mics are front and center. Bear with me a moment. Sure. From, I believe this is Mr. Calcaterra, Tim, I believe Calcaterra. Related to the recreation and youth sports statement read for Mayor Reno, what is the effective date of his statement? In other words, can split squad practices begin immediately as long as social distancing specifics are followed? If I may, as soon as practicable, and we'll work together with recreation to facilitate an expedient answer to that question. We could talk tomorrow or later on tonight if you want to discuss it, and we can work on that. And if there are any other questions of recreation, please, our door is open. We'll facilitate that engagement as soon as practical, so we can make sure that all of the different issues are addressed as they would normally be in season. There's a question, why is the council repeating the ordinances from Charles and a related similar question, Ray? I would like to know why are the ordinances being proposed without the public attendance, which I think would tie to executive orders in the pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, again, as I mentioned at the beginning, we certainly would prefer to have people in the room. But, you know, as we've mentioned in previous meetings, the business of the town must go on. We're doing our best to have these meetings but also being as transparent as we can be. We did take feedback from our first meeting that the audio and visual needed to be upgraded. We did get the both upgraded. You know, we hope it's coming through better. The feedback we got at the last meeting, the video certainly is better, and I think zooms in on people so you can actually see what they're saying along with hearing it. But we hear your frustration on that, but unfortunately, you know, given the executive orders and the time we're living with COVID-19, this is the best we're trying to do right now.
Next item is from Eleanor Hannum. By repealing the ordinances, what effect will it have on our taxes, our neighborhoods, schools, and quality of life in our neighborhoods?
Well, thanks for the question. You know, so we've repeatedly said up here that, you know, this council, this 2020 council, is incredibly focused on the quality of life of the residents, and we went so far as to explain what we think that means in hearing from residents. You know, it's really every way you can measure a town, whether it's fiscally. We've talked about the fact that we have a AA plus S&P bond rating, which is incredibly high in a state that's incredibly low. We have low traffic. We try to keep our taxes low. You know, and if you look at the dollar amount that our taxes went up in the budget that we recently approved, you know, it's a fraction of other towns in the state, and you know, frankly, pick one. You know, my own looking at other towns, the increases are dramatically higher. Our school systems, which this council has moved $1 million of surplus into our school system to help keep our teachers, keep our students, and keep the programs that they need happy and taught the way they need to be taught. And you know, other things, including our roads and other services, are all things that we're here to support. Other things we've done, I think, in support of that, Ms. Hannum, is, and I know you know it and you've commented on them. You know, recently we passed a soil fill ordinance, which protects the town from developers bringing in dirt that's unchecked. With a lot of good questions around that over the last two meetings, and I think from the feedback we got at the end of the last meeting on that, it was appreciated. And then, you know, probably the last thing to mention is open space. We've been very clear that this council wants to continue to pursue open space. We did a very large purchase last year with Rover Farms. However, we recognize that we have a fair amount of funds in our open space budget right now, over $5 million, as well as an annual contribution to that fund of about $1.4 million. So it is something that takes time, but with respect to overall quality of life, we think all of those play into it, and we certainly want to support it going forward. I don't know of any direct impact with the ordinances tonight to your other question that would impact any of those, but you know, we obviously have the best intentions of the town in mind.
Thank you. I'm going to read several that have some connectivity that may relate to a prior answer, but I want to make sure that they're read into the record for the folks that asked them. From Maria Nemeth, statement is, I want to make this crystal clear. As a taxpaying resident of almost 20 years, I demand before any thoughts of reversing any rulings, especially something as monumental as the dorms, this must be tabled until us residents have a proper speaking forum before any decisions are rendered. Anything else is 100% unconstitutional, and you better have a thorough explanation if you are not tabling this tonight. Next item is from Ray. What's the hurry and why not wait until the public can attend? Question mark. Next one is from Donovan. Excuse me. If they are redundant, why did the mayor swear by them when they were put in place in the face of litigation? Next item is from Joy, and I'll stop in a moment, from Joyce Cladek. Why is this such a rush, and why can't this wait until there can be in person to address this? It's been in effect for 3 years. Why the rush? There are over 60,000 residents, and you are catering to just a few, is the comment. And a question, why is this being heard now during the quarantine, from Peter Vicinio? Essentially similar oriented questions. I wanted to read them in the group.
Okay, well, I'll try to identify and sort through them a little bit. The comment about the mayor, obviously he's not here to respond. What I will say is, the three councilmen sitting in the room tonight are all new since these initial resolutions, these initial ordinances were passed. We weren't here at the time that they were enacted. However, administratively, they've been identified as redundant. I think the attorney explained that pretty well. And I have heard from residents who did not understand that the rescinding of them, particularly the dorm ordinance, which seemed to get a lot of questions prior to the meeting. In fact, there is no difference. Either way, the applicant needs to go before a land use board in order to move forward with the application. It has to be reviewed. A review process is a good thing. We have land use laws. We have good land use laws in town, and we have both the planning and zoning board that are responsible for reviewing those and making sure that they're followed. And that is the case either way, whether or not it's rescinded or not. Mr. McGuckin, I don't know if you had any other comments based on those questions.
I don't believe so, Mr. Council President.
Next item is from Ms. Hannum. Why isn't this repeal ordinance up on the Jackson website for residents to read? They are always on the site for us to read in this format of not giving transparency for residents to analyze.
Mr. McGuckin, can you answer that?
Sure.
For first reading, does the town need to or typically put up the documentation, I guess, before it becomes actually, before it goes to second reading?
Technically, it's not even a document that could be disclosed if it's not passed on first reading. The purpose of first reading is to introduce the ordinance. That's what it's for. The public hearing will be held in 2 weeks on May 26th. Between the time it's introduced and voted upon to be introduced, the ordinance is then published as required by law and is available for inspection at Town Hall. So the public hearing on the ordinance is not this evening. The public hearing is after it is introduced and on May 26th, 2 weeks later.
Okay, and the only other thing I'd add to that is, we've also been asked and answered, and frankly, in some ways complimented on transparency on things like open comments in areas of the agenda where we typically don't need to do that by law, as Mr. McGuckin explained. But we'll review that and see if that is something to consider going forward.
Thank you. Next is from Joseph Krokowski. Why is David Enzelbuck still an alternate to the planning board when he attended a coupon meeting as others did and were forced to resign? This is a double standard. Next item is from Kimberly saying this issue should be tabled. Next item is from Lisa Dansky saying, explain that in a layman term. You may have already, that may refer to a prior question. Did you want to?
Well, the first comment about the planning board member, the council doesn't appoint to planning. So that is something I respectfully ask you to direct the question to the mayor, which I'm sure if you send to his email, he'll respond to that. With respect to explaining it in layman's terms, again, the ordinance that is in place today requires one land use board to review and approve. Rescinding it requires another land use board to approve. So it is not a permitted use by rescinding it, which again, just from residents that reached out to me and I think other council members, that was some confusion. But the rescinding of this is it's administrative and because it is a redundant item, and it doesn't change the fact that an applicant will have to go before a land use board in order to get approval. I hope that explains.
Thank you. And there are many, many other chat items and questions and comments. Generally speaking, as moderating this through Zoom, if there are items that appear to be off topic or in other type of, whether it's inappropriate or what have you, I would defer to the township attorney in an appropriate forum. What I'm trying to recite are the items that are relevant, or as best as I can surmise, relevant to open public comment and the council as well. Again, this is from Ms. Hannum. What zones are affected by the school zones?
Mr. McGuckin?
Well, as of 2010, schools were not permitted, I believe it's 2010, schools were not permitted in the R1 zone, and that continues no matter what happens with this ordinance. What this ordinance does is returns the schools to the same position they were in 2017, and that's the R2, R3, and R5, R20, R15, and R9, and the multifamily zones, exactly as it existed in 2017. I understand there have not been any applications for those areas, but they would be returned as uses that would be permitted in those zones.
Thank you. Next item, the current ordinance 0317 and 0417 are clear and unambiguous. There is no quote redundant legislation, close quote. You'll be making it ambiguous and littered with loopholes. Ordinance 03-17 and ordinance 04-17 must stand. Next item is from Donovan. I'm sorry. I'll flag that for appropriateness. I'll flag the next one for appropriateness and defer it to Mr. McGuckin. Richard Ciulo. Mr. McGuckin, you just said that dormitories at the time 04-17 was adopted were not permitted in Jackson Township. Is that correct? Question mark. With regard to redundancy, what is the harm in leaving 04-17 on the books? Question mark.
The answer to your question is yes, it was not, they were not permitted when the ordinance was adopted. They would not be permitted after it's repealed. As far as what is the harm, the township's been sued in federal court in 3 different litigation matters. That's why.
Thank you. Next item is just from a general, a phone number, which I won't verbalize, but it's in the record. With the current social distancing due to the pandemic, will there be new guidelines, my words, that schools and high-density homes, that aren't for single families have to follow? Will social distancing find its way into land use regulations is how I would paraphrase that.
Well, I guess I really can't answer yes or no on that. I'd say in general, the pandemic has certainly influenced our livelihoods in many ways, and it wouldn't surprise me if something is incorporated. But at this point, I couldn't guess at what that is.
Next item again, Ms. Hannum, Land Use Board, what are the qualifications, question mark, and what zones, question mark, should not be in the residential zones? Quite sure what that question entails.
I'm not clear.
Okay. Michelle Campbell, kudos to the council for making the effort to continue with the work of the township, inclusive of the public. From Ray, so why repeal this ordinance without public attendance? Question mark. That would be executive orders.
Yeah, again, we feel your frustration. We're hoping to get everybody back into town hall as soon as the executive orders are lifted. I'll tell you, it's better for us, it's better for you, and there is a lot of work that has to go on behind the scenes to even bring a meeting like this together. But we are trying to be as transparent and bring the public in as best we can.
From Robert Skinner, question, are these repealed ordinances going to pave the way to settling lawsuits? Mr. McGuckin, I would assume.
No way to know if that will happen.
Mr. Facinio, what is the harm in having a redundant ordinance which clarifies the original question mark?
Mr. McGuckin, you want to take that one too?
Sure. If the township can have the same effect without being sued, as an attorney, I would recommend the township do that.
Next time, Joe Kurkowski, why does the committee that was created by the mayor include people that aren't from Jackson? This refers to a different topic, separate, a different committee.
Yeah, so I mean, any committee that is mayor appointed, obviously, I'd want to give him an opportunity to respond. We will pass along that question to the mayor, and I'd also encourage if you have questions on that particular topic, to send him an email as well. I'm sure he'll respond.
From Joseph Sullivan, thank you for the explanation. The fact that dormitories were not a permitted use before, it makes sense that the ordinance is redundant. What changes with the repeal of the school ordinance? Question mark.
The changes are that it would go back to the way it was in 2017.
From Rosario, the name here listed is Rosario. First, I oppose this move for all the 2017 reasons given while we all attended. Now comments about the process. I strongly believe that holding this meeting today is not constitutional because it is not an emergency. And being that we attended originally, since it is being revisited, we have the right to attend personally again. This is akin to taxing without representation. It's very upsetting how I feel you are disregarding us during this time. Additionally, it is very difficult for me to really have a conversation effectively since I am not at a typewriter. Very difficult is the comment. Eleanor Hannum, why has the Multicultural Committee been canceled until further notice? I find it questionable that this committee was for Jackson residents, and it is indeed being run by the DOJ, AG, prosecutor's office, and outside residents. I'm worried that the objectives of this committee is not a multicultural objective and a different agenda. And why is this? Is the question. So if there's any response to that comment or question.
Again, thank you for the question. I would just add, similar to the last resident that asked about, I don't think he was specific on the committee, but it is a mayor's committee. I would direct the question to the mayor. Typically, he is in these meetings, and I'm sure he'll respond to it. But if you want to email him that question, otherwise we'll pass along the question as well.
From Robert Skinner to Mr. McGuckin, could Mr. McGuckin kindly explain the situation of a judge's order to revisit and revote on certain planning board applications? Question mark.
I'm not a party to that litigation, so I don't think I could comment on what the judge ruled. The the planning board is represented by other counsel.
Tim Calcaterra, thank you, Terrence Wall and Mayor Arena. As the president of Jackson, Little League, I look forward to working with the town and local officials to safely and adequately resume youth sports activity. Also, just as a note, there are many questions and comments from the same individuals. So we're trying to move through all the chat questions and comments, but we're also trying to, with this format, due to the pandemic, to ensure that everyone's voice is heard and we're not losing their voice through the process. So I just bear in mind if you have a repeated question or comment, and if it's similar to a prior comment you already perhaps had written, we're trying to also give everyone a voice and make sure that everyone's voice is heard as we move through this. This is from Vazo Party, and I apologize if I'm capturing that incorrectly, V-A-Z-Z-O-P-A-R-D-I. It's long, so I'll read it. Overcrowding, environmental concerns. High-density developments can result in unwanted environmental concerns. Has the impact to the ecosystem been considered? Natural resources, which include land and water, are limited, and their supply will eventually dry out. Lakewood's water supply cannot keep up with their growth, and therefore needed to purchase water or draw more from wells. Traffic congestion. As more developments are created, which include English basements move, the traffic volume increases and results in greater congestion. Look at the corner of South Hope Chapel and Veterans already. Have we thought about the impact on taxpayers to flip the bill when road construction needs to occur to handle the traffic congestion? Question mark. We are looking at resolving the issues short-term, parentheses, stop the lawsuits, close parentheses, but we need to be thinking about the long-term quality of life for all people who live in Jackson to enjoy our open space, nature, school funding, and the long list of reasons why families move to Jackson.
Thank you. And thank you for the question. Well, I'd respond this way. I point out first off, we hear you in terms of the time you've lived in Jackson. The three councilmen you have in the room here are all lifelong residents. We've lived here our whole lives. We've gone through the schools. We've raised our families here. So we certainly appreciate that quality of life. And when people say it, they think back to many years ago and what it was like, and hope to continue that. What I'd say we're doing to ensure exactly what you described, one of the big things is open space. We want to continue that. We want to increase it. We're making no secret of it, and we think that is one of the things that we need to do most notably. With respect to the roads, we certainly think that the town has done a very good job in maintaining the roads that the town is responsible for. You probably know there's also county roads, so the town and the administration has done a very good job working with the county to ensure that the roads are kept up to date and with as little impact to the residents of, from a tax standpoint, for the residents of the town. To kind of support that a little bit, we did just pass the municipal budget. It went up by $21 for the average taxpayer. The average taxpayer pays about $1,600 a year to support the services within the town. We're always looking for opportunities to keep that in check and certainly keep it as low as possible, certainly versus others. The comment about other towns consuming water, to be fair, there are multiple towns around Jackson that are consuming more water than their infrastructure can support. And many towns around Jackson take water from Jackson. Again, to be fair, that's multiple towns. We've been very clear just in the first few months of this year that protecting Jackson's unique environment is a top priority for this council. It has been front and center. We discussed it last year. We passed ordinances in support of not only the environment but the wildlife in a animal protection ordinance that we passed last year. We passed a soil fill ordinance just in the last month designed to ensure that developers, particularly large developers because it scales as the projects are bigger, prove, in fact, that they are bringing clean soil into the town. That's a first for the town. Quite frankly, I was surprised myself to find out that it wasn't in existence already. But to support your concerns, we hear you wholeheartedly and are looking at all areas where we can protect the town's environment to keep the town's quality of life in check, including fiscally. We've talked about that as well, and by keeping the town fiscally responsible, it keeps the taxpayers' rates to the taxpayer as low as possible.
Thank you. From Diane Campagna, you stated that the key to overall town health is fiscal responsibility, low traffic, low taxes, instead of caving to developers and high-density housing. Since COVID-19 is leading to food shortages, why not encourage more farming, co-op farming, animal farming to be more self-sustainable? Why not look to how that would preserve open space and provide for residents and jobs?
Great idea, and we will absolutely consider that.
Jack S., Jackson Board of Fire Commissioners District 3 President. I wish to comment. I'm following up, seeing if there is something there. Jackson residents, will dorms from Jackson resident, this is anonymous, will dorms be allowed in residential neighborhoods? Will existing homes be allowed to convert in residential neighborhoods from existing uses?
Attorney McGuckin, want to answer that?
No. Anyone who wants to construct a dormitory, which none have applied at any time in the history of Jackson Township, Anyone who in the future who would want to apply for dormitory would have to seek a variance from the Township Zoning Board, and they would have to meet their burden of proof under the statutes as to whether or not they should be entitled to construct one, just like any other use in the municipality. But nothing here changes that requirement of the law.
Ms. McGuckin, can you just clarify again the first reading of an ordinance and then the subsequent second reading and public hearing for the folks that may have come in late to the program here this evening, the process, the legislative process?
Of course. So an ordinance is introduced on first reading. That's what's happening this evening. There is no public comment on an ordinance when it's introduced on first reading. The council here provides that public comment on any item. And of course, people wish to comment on first reading. That's what they're doing now. However, the public hearing on the ordinance itself is scheduled when it's after it's been published and noticed. And that hearing will be held on May 26th in 2 weeks.
From Mindy Murray, why would you take the time to dissolve the ordinance if it's in place anyway? Question mark. Could you not have joined the two ordinances since it was redundant?
One is a permitted land use. The other was specifically related to dormitories. Two different provisions of the chapter.
Any other questions? Comments?
Yes, I'm trying to move through the questions here. From Ms. Hannum, so schools will be allowed in an R3 and R5 residential zone, question mark. So what you are saying is that there could be a school in the house next door on 1 acre. This is insane and will devalue an entire neighborhood, is the comment. So the first is the question is schools will be allowed in an R3 and R5 residential zone, question mark.
If the ordinance is adopted, the ordinances will go back to the way they were for decades, which permits schools in certain zones, including the R3 and R5 zones. There are standards with respect to area and so forth for schools, none of which would be changing and would still be in place.
Mr. McGuckin, I just have a procedural question on the chat functions themselves. Many folks are new to operating with Zoom, including the folks that are operating it. So as it relates to comments or from the public that may be inflammatory, what would be your recommended procedure as far as entering them into the official record? Because the conversational style is different in regard to this forum.
So public comment is to allow people to express their concerns and comments. However, the chair always has the right to prohibit certain comments from being made, which could not only be inflammatory, but could put the township in a position where it is condoning, for instance, some type of biased behavior at an official meeting. So I can't tell you because I don't have access to the comments. But if there's something that you believe is in that realm, then technically it's the chair's call as to whether or not that comment should be permitted.
So what I'm just using as a layperson, a reasonable, prudent person standard to discern what is relevant and what is not relevant, similar to what the chair would, how the meeting would be conducted with microphone in an in-person setting. Bear with me a moment. Coming from the bottom up, from Nicholas, everything should be recorded, and that's correct, and everything is being recorded, just to validate that item. Bear with me, please.
Sure.
From Denise Garner, comment, is this the growth machine theory where business, cultural, and government elites control zoning bureaucracies through campaign contributions and influence that a developer has interest to control the zoning process and obtain favorable zoning decisions? Question.
Well, again, thanks for the question. I'd say the last ordinance that was passed on the soil fill is probably the best example of where we're putting the town first. If you recall, Mr. McGuckin read into the record that there was opposition by two developers, or let me be clear, attorneys for two developers who opposed on record the soil fill ordinance, and in at least one case asked us to shelve the ordinance until further comments or questions could be provided by that attorney for that developer. From our perspective, I think it's while we welcome all comments, and I was clear when we got those comments that night, that we do try to strike a balance between bringing smart business into town, putting it in areas within the town to keep traffic away from residential areas and kind of the areas of town you would expect to not want a lot of traffic. So we're certainly also pro-business to the town because it helps residents keep their taxes low as we bring in commercial rateables. However, we want to strike a balance with that, with protecting what we believe is the unique environment that is Jackson. And that soil fill ordinance, while objected to by not one but two attorneys for developers, we moved forward with it and it passed unanimously.
Thank you. And just an observation of what's very interesting about the Zoom platform. I'll read a comment. This is from Jeff Nemeth. You are making up the public input response as you go along. Every question should be answered, period. Verifying the unconstitutional way this forum is to us tax-paying residents. And in many ways a fair comment, but just to give you an example, there's Eleanor Hannum, resident, and there is also on this chat forum an E. Hannum, which I assumed incorrectly, my apologies to Ms. Hannum, that was also referring to her. So we have the challenge of this technology is that you want to be fully transparent and give full voice to all the folks. But we do also, in this particular instance, have a representation from one of your residents that her name is used, basically being spoofed to further questions that I'm doing my reasonable best to filter out to the extent that they are not otherwise appropriate. So just to give you an example of the reason why I'm pausing and taking our time to be as transparent as possible, we're also trying to discern that you have the folks that are listed. It preserves lives and prevents tragedies such as happened in Keansburg in 1981 when 30 people died in a nursing home fire, in 1963 when 25 died in a rooming house fire, in Atlantic City in 1961 when 5 died in a rooming house fire in Lakewood, in 1984 when 8 teenagers died right here in Jackson Township and 3 students died only in 200, I apologize the way it's written, at Seton Hall University. Please save lives and put politics aside, is his comment.
Again, appreciate you taking the time to put those stats together. Obviously, pretty tragic items that were listed. But again, I think if you heard what Mr. McGuckin said, and again, I don't know the timing of those comments versus when Mr. McGuckin clarified. But again, the ordinance repealing one doesn't make a dormitory a permitted use within Jackson. It still needs to go through the land use board. It needs to be reviewed. It needs to be approved or denied depending on the application, but it doesn't go unchecked. So again, it doesn't make it an approved use, which I think from the comments, it sounds like the concern the gentleman that wrote that.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, please.
Mr. McGuckin,
Yes.
prior to rescinding this ordinance, if it passes in the next meeting, or if somebody came last week with a proposal to include that included a dormitory, while under ban, would there be anything preventing them through the old ordinance, the way it is now, 417, from seeking relief through the zoning board?
Thank you, Councilman Curran. Again, absolutely correct. That's why the ordinance is redundant. Whether the ordinance is in place or not, anyone has the right to make an application for a dormitory, and they would go to the local zoning board of adjustment for that purpose, regardless of the ordinance being in effect. As of today, if someone came in today, they would still have to go to the zoning board, and they have the right to go to the zoning board and to seek an approval thereof before the zoning board. That's the same before or after this ordinance is, assuming it's adopted on the 26th.
So even banned, they still have the right to seek relief through the zoning board.
Absolutely. That's exactly what a zoning board is for. They have a right to seek relief under the New Jersey Municipal Land Use Law for any use that you could possibly imagine in the state of New Jersey. If it's not permitted, they have the right to go to the zoning board to make their application.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. From Mindy Murray, comment, this should be tabled. From a Jeanette Filippo, excuse me. However, the rejection of the dorms was heard by a judge, was it not? Question. It just seems like the interest of one part of the community, and if anyone has a difference of opinion, they are labeled. Chloe DeRosa states, this should really be postponed. Cannot understand half of what is said. This should be unconstitutional. Mindy Murray states, culture is not religion. That's why many towns have not gotten involved. So why did Jackson get involved? This is a question on a different topic from listed as a Jackson resident. When will you be creating an ordinance that sets standards for township-wide air roofs, one for utility pole utilization and one for air roofs in neighborhoods and one for neighborhoods with underground utilities, as a question?
Well, there was one question in there around, was this before a judge? Mr. McGuckin, you want to answer that one?
It is not, other than there's currently lawsuits challenging the ordinance 0417, which is in federal court, but a judge has not ruled on it as of yet.
And with the comments around the ERUs, appreciate the comment and something that council may consider.
From Peter Vicinio, is the language in the new ordinance more restrictive than the old ordinance? Question mark. What are the major differences between the old and the new ordinance?
Mr. McGuckin.
The new ordinance, if adopted, would be exactly identical to the way the ordinance existed as of 2017 before it was amended. There'd be no difference whatsoever. It'd be identical.
From Jeff Nemeth, do you as a council believe this is a fair and constitutional way for a town changing subject to be handled by Zoom? Question mark. If council can explain why this can't be delayed, I'm sure many of us residents would like an answer. Reading it verbatim.
Ms. McGuckin, you want to comment on the guidelines that were provided for having meetings such as this?
Thank you. Unfortunately, or whatever, the township is required by law to continue operations, just as the state of New Jersey does. The state of New Jersey has directed the governing bodies how to handle these meetings and provided guidelines as to what they can do to continue that process. The township has done its best to comply with those demands. The township went out, as indicated earlier in the meeting, and obtained much more upgraded equipment for purposes of conducting these meetings. We, as of right now, don't know how long this will continue, this type of process where town hall is closed and people aren't allowed. Like every town in the state of New Jersey, However, the township needs to continue to operate, and everything that they would normally do, they are required to do. And that's what's going on now.
If I could just add that the latter part of what Mr. McGuckin said, and Mr. Nemeth, I appreciate the comment and certainly the frustration. If you told me in early March that we'd be here in almost mid-May, still under these conditions, I would have told you, there's no way in the world. And unfortunately, at least while things seem to be loosening up, if you will, there hasn't been a clear plan communicated yet as to when things will change, where we can get people back in the room. So, and I think that's really the crux of it is, if we just stopped having meetings, we certainly would have a problem running the town, and we just don't know how much longer it's going to happen. So we're doing the best we can.
Chris Sikorsky writes, why does this council then work on helping small businesses with opening plans instead of ordinances? So the question is related to helping small businesses move forward to reopening in Jackson.
Well, I'm assuming you may not have been part of other meetings and other communication. First off, I'd point out that every member of council in the room and not are currently or have been a small business owner, all four of us. So we certainly understand as much as anybody the plight of small business owners on a regular basis, never mind under these conditions. To be a small business owner is frankly a brave undertaking. Under these conditions, it's beyond belief. So we came out, the council came out, the mayor came out early in support of small businesses. You can see some of that language on our site. We certainly have complimented and supported town-initiated, resident-initiated sites on places like Facebook, supporting small businesses. We're big on promoting it. The mayor has every week provided an update on his discussions with the governor. And if you heard the opening statement that I read for him, while it was specifically around recreation, he has easily had those same conversations around small business. We all believe that while we want to stay safe and make sure that we flatten the curve of COVID-19, there are ways of doing it that allow for small businesses to reopen. I'll speak for myself. I think you can get a haircut wearing a mask. I think we can limit the number of attendees in a business to start. Unfortunately, under these circumstances, we've all kind of been trained to wear masks at this point, where 6 months ago we may have felt kind of silly doing it. It's become a matter of health and I'd say a matter of way of our life now. So I'm with the mayor, and I think the council's with the mayor, that we can get small businesses reopened and still practice social distancing and allow small businesses who need to be open and their employees to get back to work and to earn a paycheck. So we're with you. Apologize if you haven't seen or heard from us prior, but we have been very much out front in support of small business.
Christina Kisseberth says, why can't council wait in this till public can attend? Wait until the public can attend. What's the rush? Are you taking advantage of a COVID excuse? Galaxy phone and McGuckin Jackson residents demand rescheduling of this meeting when ban is lifted and mayor, is in attendance. Bear with me one moment. Shaky Jake, who in another post had referred to himself as Phil Stilton. Shaky Jake writes, if the law is redundant and changes nothing, why are we even doing this? Kimberly states, many of us understand that the council must continue to function, but the more specific question is, why aren't the high impact, quote unquote, high impact issues and decisions not tabled until a more appropriate forum? And lastly, for the moment, it's not from Maria Nemeth, it's not stopping the meeting, it's tabling some monumental decisions. Let's make that clear. here's a perfect example of the skewing of what a resident is trying to say by having a one-sided forum, which we're trying to have an iterative, collaborative forum. But I wanted to read that as well. And just one last one from Shaky Jake, who referred to himself as Phil Stilton. In light of the reopening of Jackson Park application of the planning board and impending loss against Jackson Trails, it is still the council's opinion that rezoning acres, hundreds of acres of wooded land near Great Adventure to allow multifamily as specified in recently approved township ordinance. Does the council still feel that was a good ordinance to pass, considering the sheer volume of new construction now in our immediate future?
Okay,
So there's several there.
yeah, so I think generally I've heard three distinct questions. I'll take the first, and the third I'll ask Mr. McGuckin to take the second. The first was around the comment about the mayor being in the meeting. Just for everyone's clarification, the mayor is an invited guest to council. We do have an open invite, so we certainly welcome his attendance, but the mayor is really under no obligation to attend council meetings. He does do it's his choice to do, meet the mayor on a fairly regular basis, or certainly was doing it when town hall was open. But the requirement for the mayor to be here to conduct council business is not a requirement. He's an invited guest, and we welcome it at any time. Mr. McGuckin, if you want to talk about timing, and then I'll take the last question about the.
I'm sorry,
ordinance.
If you could just repeat the timing issue, I just didn't quite catch it.
I think there were multiple questions around what's the rush, and is there any reason for timing?
Thank you. Well, the township's involved in 3 separate lawsuits. One of them seeks an injunction against the township and the enforcement of the township zoning regulations. Those are pending in federal court. Those litigations continue, and they've been pending, and we anticipate a judge's ruling on some of those things. And if that ruling is against the municipality, the township could be in for a very difficult time. So there's been a lot of advice provided by attorneys for the township, and that advice has been provided, and that's it.
And then the last question regarding the multi-use zone, I think that the gentleman that asked it was referring to. For those that may not be aware, the council passed a zone that designates a corridor on Route 537 as multi-use. The question was, are we still in support of it? It did pass unanimously. I think we given the position the council has been very forthcoming about over the last 18 months, we fully support it. The land that was not zoned multi-use sat there for decades, not generating revenue for the town. If you don't know, roughly 90% of the revenue that's generated to run the town comes from residents. That is a drastic imbalance compared to the rest of the state. That means that only 10% roughly comes from businesses. Now, in Jackson, we have a desire to balance that with our quality of life, and I don't think that's lost on anybody. But again, we've been very forthcoming about the fact that we do want to bring in what we call smart commercial ratables, which is business into town that generates smart, clean ratables. Clean meaning they contribute revenue to the town, but don't take much, if anything, back. So if a business comes into town and pays taxes to the town, but doesn't put or doesn't consume services from the town, that's considered a clean ratable. We, instead of picking one particular piece of property, we zoned everything between Six Flags and 195 as multi-use, which is attractive. We didn't make it up. The other towns along 195 have a very similar, maybe named differently, but generally the same type of zone, and do it for the same reason. It's in a good location. While there's, we did hear some concerns about traffic out there, which we wholeheartedly agree with needs to be addressed. That traffic does sit on the outside of the town and does not travel through the middle of the town. The estimates on revenue or commercial ratables go anywhere from $3 to $5 million in the next few years. When you have a municipal budget that is roughly $47 million. You know, 5 million out of 47 is a lot. For us, we've been very clear that that is something we support. We think it was done well. It was done in an area that most residents agree, if we're going to have business in this town, that's where to do it. And as always, we are trying to balance that with other things to protect Jackson's environment. And just in the last month, we think we've shown that.
Thank you. There's an earlier question I was trying to locate it, but it related to not the current issue. This was from Mr. Stilton as well. He had asked, I'm trying to locate it, but basically was asking, he was looking at the budget and there was an indication of health benefits for elected officials, and he was asking which elected officials are receiving benefits, and I believe that those are Councilman Bressi, and I believe the mayor as well. If that's the answer to the question, that would be public information, so I'll share that, that topic. So that question is answered if the, you know, the name on the chat is accurate. I want to make sure I answered that. Let me just scroll down a little bit here. From Lavanya, I believe, how will the repeal of these two ordinances affect neighboring towns? Question mark. What are the consequences of this in the future for other towns in the area who may be faced with similar applications? Question mark. This is not just about Jackson. It has far larger repercussions for all of us, period.
Well, the general statement, if Mr. McGuckin, you have anything else to add? You know, I'd say Jackson focuses on Jackson's land use laws. I think we're outspoken about it. We certainly understand that land use laws help preserve the quality of life within the town. I'd say generally, historically, we've done our best to put the best land use laws in place. In some cases, you know, you may have what we've seen tonight with some redundancy, and we're trying to do a little bit of administrative cleanup on at least one of them. But in terms of how they affect other towns, you know, every town has their own land use laws. Some are dramatically different, and again, without singling out any particular town, towns all over New Jersey have suffered from not practicing good land use laws and protecting their infrastructure, their environment, the water supply. You know, they've suffered as a consequence. So, as Mr. McGuckin had explained, though, in this case, we're putting two ordinances back to where they were in 2017. The impact we hope will be minimal, if nothing, you know, with respect to at least one of them. And you know, we'll continue to keep our eyes on land use going forward. Mr. McGuckin, you have anything else you want to add?
Not really. I think you covered it.
Okay, from Jackson resident states, this whole Zoom meeting proves how trolls can try to tarnish Jackson's good name. It also proves that the continuous harassment that residents receive while speaking up about legitimate concerns, constant harassment to silence many by instilling fear, as you can see someone just use Eleanor's name that wasn't her. And we're navigating this process.
Yeah, well, thanks again for the comment. I'd say, listen, we all are trying to do our best with this. I think Business Administrator Wall is doing a great job of trying to get everybody's comments out, and you know, in some cases, maybe summarize some of the comments or refer back to some previous responses we've given. This is new to not just Jackson, but to multiple states, including all of New Jersey. And we understand the frustration, and certainly we all look forward to getting back to what was normal.
Yes, and just as a matter of course, the Township Attorney can certainly review all the different chat messages and in regard to the official record and how that is formatted. That's certainly a matter for the Township Attorney and the Municipal Clerk to determine that course of action. What we're simply trying to do is to have as much inclusion as possible, to mimic the dynamics of folks being able to take their time out of their busy day and come up to a microphone and speak to the governing body. I have this an item. This is from Maria Nemeth. Is it a concern of I'm going from the bottom up now. Is it a concern of the township with our state being so dense already Hence, why are we second highest COVID state in the country? Are we prepared to have thousands more reside here quickly? Question mark. Can restrictions be set of how much influx in our town? Editing that a little bit. Influx in our town? Question mark. From Jeff Neiman.
Yeah, no, if I could comment first, and then again, Mr. McGuckin, if you want to comment. Excellent question and comment. I will point out that New Jersey, if you don't know, has the highest foreclosure rates of any state in the country. That means more houses sit empty than any other state in the country. The fact that the state imposes what was known as COA on various municipalities, including Jackson, fundamentally, I find ridiculous. When you live in a state where you have the highest foreclosure rate, it seems unusual to me that you would impose more housing on any municipality. So I think it's safe to say that this council has spoken up on many occasions, frankly, past and present, that we're not fans of COA. It is a state mandated program, and we do our best to navigate through it. But I'd say we're with you 100% on that. That we don't believe that in the state that's the densest today, has the most residents leaving, the most businesses leaving, has the highest foreclosure rate, should really be building and forcing additional housing. Ms. McGuckin, I don't know if you have anything to add.
I think the question regarding will COVID have an impact on state land use law? I think that's a very interesting question, and time's going to tell. I think that is certainly something that should be looked at, and particularly timing and so forth. And as far as the affordable housing obligations of the state, I think Jackson's been a leader in that regard in attempting to oppose a policy that has such a negative effect upon the municipality in a number of ways, and has resulted in various items of litigation over the years, and the township continues its efforts to protect the quality of life of all of our residents.
Thank you. And thanks again for the question.
A question from Ray. Why can't the township build low-income housing and farm out a management company to handle the rentals? Question.
Could you repeat it just one more time?
Yes. This may tie to what was formerly known as COA.
Yeah.
Why can't the township build low-income housing and then farm out a management company to handle the rentals? Essentially, get into the business.
Yeah, good suggestion, and something we will definitely consider.
Another comment is that doesn't have a name attached to it. We also try to read those as well. I don't have a problem with the sports center, hotels, et cetera. What I do have a problem with is more high-density housing. We need good ratables for sure, but we do not need high-density housing in dorms, which devalue all of our homes. That's a comment. It's not a question. I'll share with you. Bear with me a moment. I believe there's a follow-up from Mr. Seidler, John Seidler, President, Board of Fire Commissioners, District 3. Please consult with the fire officials in the 3 Jackson fire districts with respect to all fire safety and construction safety initiatives. Life safety for all of our residents, all of our citizens, residents, and all of our firefighters, police officers, and EMS personnel should be our #1 priority.
We wholeheartedly agree. I think this council in particular has been very forthcoming about our support for all of our first responders. I've said it personally multiple times. Our first responders, including our police, are second to none in the state. One of the things that Jackson could be proud of in a poll in 2017 that you can probably still find on 101.5, New Jersey 101.5, the radio station, Jackson was rated #2 in safety in the state. We're the second safest town in the state of New Jersey. That is because of our police, our fire, and EMS.
Thank you. Diane Campagna has a comment. The state wants to mandate dense housing on a rural/suburban township with precious natural resources. Yet there are empty shopping centers, empty homes, empty factories. Shouldn't those areas be repurposed first before tapping into our town? Comment. That's a comment.
It's a comment. Well, I'd say, in general, the council as well as the mayor are certainly supportive of your concern. We definitely don't want to build more than we need. And while we are attracting, for example, I've been asked to comment about a zone out near Great Adventure earlier. We are certainly supportive of new types of business, which that type of zone would invite business that frankly couldn't operate in town before. But we're also keenly aware of businesses within town. And again, this is why you have land use boards, planning and zoning. When somebody new may want to come into town, and depending on the type of project, that project needs to be evaluated in consideration of the rest of the town.
I'd like to read a comment. This is from Eleanor Hannum, I believe the actual Eleanor Hannum. And it might be something to refer if she wishes to reach out to, for assistance if she's being threatened in any way. It says, as you know, I, in conjunction with numerous residents, have a grassroots land use organization in Jackson. I would like to let the council, mayor, and township attorney be aware that I have been contacted by the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection with several complaints against her and her group that is only being done by specific developers as a threat, she writes here. Therefore, you should know your residents who speak out and practice our First Amendment rights are now being threatened to do so. She's advising the public for that.
Well, thank you for advising. Ms. Hannon, I think you know from previous comments and questions around specific ordinances, we are certainly in support of protecting land use in the town, protecting the environment within the town. You've had some good questions regarding those ordinances. And as I mentioned to the public earlier, we have had representatives from developers come forth and oppose some of the ordinances we have. But again, our interests are in the residents of Jackson and protecting the quality of life of Jackson. We try to do that in a balanced way in consideration of business as well as environment and other things that we've talked about. But we do appreciate you bringing to our attention any concerns or threats, and I see Attorney McGuckin noting it.
Listen, if the DEP is threatening anyone, you urge him to contact the town, and we will make a communication to the DEP immediately.
Comment from Denise Gardner. COA has grown out of control. It does not utilize the important natural resources impacted, or has it been updated to include the MUA usage of water allocation? You need to stand up against this growth machine theory. Jackson Township houses far too many important resources to be completely overbuilt. A need for a cross-analysis, should be demanded by your council, by the council, in protecting all of the residents in Jackson Township and throughout both watersheds. We are in need of shared resources for preservation to help us now and well into the future. And a different question that is a land use oriented question for Mr. McGuckin. When will you be creating ordinances, well, for the council, but it would be a legal question, creating ordinances that set standards for houses of worship and residential homes, especially ones that are popping up according to this, they're typing, along residential neighborhoods? Standards should be created for vacant homes, but also ones that are lived in, question mark. Has there ever been an interpretation for a house of worship, question mark?
The township currently has ordinances in place as to what's permitted uses in various zones. And if something's being operated in violation of that, they would be subject to a zoning violation. I don't know how else I could answer the question. If the township wishes to change the ordinances in the future, I'm sure they will consider it.
scrolling through.
Sure.
It's a good question on process. From Peter Vicinio, what prohibits a bad actor from another town dialing into Zoom and having racist slurs entered into the record as we navigate this process?
Well, I'd say generally nothing prevents it other than we are screening as Mr. Wall mentioned, and we certainly we are certainly sensitive to introducing any comments that might target anybody in particular with kind of negative thoughts in mind. I mean, we can't really prevent anybody from not logging in if they have the Zoom login ID, but we do our best to try to screen that out if possible.
And just as a general comment, there are, I would say, hundreds of chat comments, and we try to navigate them. And I apologize if there was a question or comment that you had that was not addressed. They are, if an item appears to be personnel, which would be a different matter, or if it appears to be speak to some level of appropriateness, I'm just trying to be judicious on behalf of Jackson Township as essentially as a proxy to the council vice president to navigate the chat documents as best we can. So if you bear with me a moment, I want to.
While you do that,
Yes.
I also just wanted to clarify on that last comment. It under a normal meeting, if you will, where people would be in town hall, we certainly welcome comments from residents outside of town. That's been a norm, and it's certainly welcome. But to your question about filtering out, I think the term was bad actors. Certainly with this type of technology, it's easier to be a bad actor, I think, than if you were sitting in a room. And we do our best to deal with it.
This is an item from Mr. Robert Skinner stating, I'm not a fan like other residents, parentheses, close parentheses, of using a very aged 15-year environmental study in supporting new land use applications. As an Assemblyman, Mr. McGuckin, are there any statutes that guide developers to utilize newer studies? If not, this may bring rise to having a new ordinance adopted on the subject. So it's asking if there's any particular legislation or from a legal perspective as our attorney in the present role in regard to older environmental studies.
The case in Jackson, which is the only one I can speak to at the moment, related to an issue with Pinelands, and the issue of how old this study is controlled by the Pinelands Commission, and the township doesn't have any authority to change that. The Pinelands Commission can change that. And under the municipal land use law, townships are limited to what they can require. And if the statute doesn't permit it, the township cannot require it. And there is no provision in the law for the township to require certain dates of environmental studies, because the ultimate decision as to whether the environment is harmed is related to the DEP, and in certain instances CAFRA, and of course the Pinelands Commission, or up north in the Highlands Commission. So townships do not have that legal authority. The state's never given it to them, and it's not contained in the municipal land use law. Only the DEP has that authority, not the townships.
Question from Rosario. When the new ordinance passes, will the town zoning department be responsible for inspecting the school? I'm not sure what school it's referring to. And its dormitories to make sure they are in compliance for, number one, an efficient and thorough education, and number two, dormitories facilities meet the codes for safety, and number three, how frequently, at least once or twice a year, to make sure they are safe.
Ms. McGuckin, you want to take that?
Well, schools are regulated by the state of New Jersey, as well as fire code requirements. The state is the one responsible for approving schools themselves. The ordinance does not permit dormitories in any respect, so If someone wanted to try to build a dormitory, as I indicated previously, just as today, they would have to go to the zoning board and seek an approval to do so. And the board would have the right to say yes, no, or impose any conditions they thought appropriate based on any concerns the board might have. So as far as schools are concerned, the state controls that. The zoning indicates where they can go, but other than that, there's limited control the township has over that.
And Diane Campagna asks, if a dorm ever got approved, her opinion, which I hope it does not, would it meet co-obligation? It is after all affordable housing. So question and a comment. Would it meet a COA obligation? Is the question.
I don't know if it would it, Mr. McGuckin? Is it considered
It's there's no way to know without more information. And we have a township co-attorney, and I'm sure we could answer that.
We'd have to get back to the resident.
Okay, and I have a comment from Shaky Jake, who represents himself as Phil Stilton, said that the doors are all locked and they have filtering ability in Zoom. Why should they answer anyone? I could just share that our doors are monitored by Public Works during the day because the buildings, all of the buildings during the pandemic are currently not open to the public. There are means and methods for folks to bring zoning applications and other types of paperwork in so we could transact business, pay taxes, things along those lines. And we also ensure that we do temperature checks of every person that comes into the building to ensure that they don't have a fever, as well as we're engaged in very extensive disinfecting due to COVID-19 to make sure that folks are safe from a life and health perspective. So as far as the doors are locked, if they're not locked, there's a process for employees to make sure they're safe for themselves and their children and their families. And we're still able and open to transact business for the public. And if I may, we're also instituting GovPilot. We have about 20 modules already rolled out. So previously you would have paper applications and things of that nature. And if you don't mind, just doing a quick update,
please.
Since so many of the folks are here listening.
Yeah.
The governing body, the council president, council vice president, the mayor, we're virtualizing many of the different processes that you would engage with in Jackson to make it easier, simpler, effortless through automated permitting processes and things of that nature, including working with GovPilot, which is an automated processing platform, as well as Municipay, which is a credit card processing platform, and also rolling out through Civic Plus, Civic Engage, which will be a beautiful new website in the next couple of months. So if we just give a quick example from the municipal clerk's office who reports to the council, can you share your experience with GovPilot? And this gives the residents, it's off topic, but it gives them an idea of how transacting with in a post-COVID method, and even now, how their experience can be with certain modules in the clerk's office. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. There are many things that we do in the clerk's office that always required in the past, coming into town hall, meeting our hours of operation, and paper applications. We have marriage licenses, vital records, Oprahs, no-knock registry, park and ride. There's a bunch of applications, mobile home parks, kennels. I can't think of them all. There are even more, and I think more are coming. My staff has been phenomenal in implementing this system and making it more convenient for the public, particularly with marriage applications now, because we have to do that in person, but we have so much of it completed online that all they have to do is come, take an oath, pay the fee, and take their license away. It has really helped the public in that way, and they are so grateful. They're so happy. They come in tears, because they want to get married, and what are you supposed to do? They can't do it. Now they can. You can fill out applications from the comfort of your home, and we will respond to them immediately. So we're really helping the public in that way. And I'm very grateful to the council and to our administrator for bringing this forth at this time, because it's really made our operation very efficient and we look forward to the future as well.
Thank you. And as a recap, we now have GIS on there, contract management, vehicle maintenance, Open Public Records Act, vital records requests, marriage licenses, and also, which we've also rolled out, judicial open public records, residential parking permits, property maintenance, Gov Alert apps. So if you see there's a pothole or some other issue or concern that you have, you can simply take a picture and send it right in, and we'll make sure it's routed to the appropriate area. Maybe it's Public Works, we need cold patch or hot patch or somehow to handle a life safety issue very quickly. Vacant property, landlord registration, alarm registration, limo operator, mobile home park, non-residential parking. And the last couple items I'll share, tree removal permit, CCO, DPW work order processes, so we can analyze the requests that you've made, what's open, what's closed, and what's pending. Zoning permits as well, and a number of different items for disabled veterans, the tax exemption item, senior citizen tax deduction, disabled veteran tax exemption, clothing bin donations, and also employment applications and more. These are all being rolled out, and we're going to maximize the transparency and efficiency to Jackson public. So we'll share that with you.
And thank you. And to summarize that long list that you just went through 2 months ago, that could not be done online. Is that fair?
We did Oprah's online, and that probably was about it.
So that entire list, otherwise, 2 months ago, the residents couldn't do any of that.
You would have to come to town hall or mail it in.
That's great. And I think, maybe it was a little off topic, but I think it was related to the question that was asked around, town hall being, it's obviously not locked based on your application, but it is somewhat limited, right? But I think the efforts that you're making is to allow residents to continue to do what they need to do related to the municipality, and more it can be done online now.
Provide maximum dollar
Great.
for the tax dollar, maximum benefit.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, Ms. Hannum, thank you. Kudos, Mr. Wall and Ms. Kisty. You are amazing, and she's amazing. Definitely amazing. Absolutely. And last item I see from Ray is, can council members request that the mayor attend the following meeting?
We will request it, and the mayor knows it's an open request. And again, there were questions directed to him that it's only fair that he answer. But I can also tell you, he has been a regular participant in these meetings. It's only lately with a conflict. He mentioned a meeting with the governor's office, which if you heard the opening comments, which was his statement, he's been pretty passionate about trying to get Jackson back in business, if you will, both from a small business and a recreation standpoint. But we will mention it to him, and we will let him know that he's always welcome.
Okay, and I do have an item here. This is from Shaky Jake, who refers to himself as Phil Stilton. He indicates to me that it's not my town, it's his town, and that he has a right to ask a question, that I should do my job. So his question, Mr. McGuckin, he's asking, I think several times in this chat, as I'm trying to navigate the questions from the residents, he's referencing that you work in Jackson, also in Toms River, and he's asking if it's true that you also represent the Lakewood Township Zoning Board, your firm. So I wanted to share a little bit of Mr. Stilton's plethora of questions in the chat function. But again, when it reaches into personnel and items that may or may not be appropriate, but since it's strained into and embedded in so much of the chat, I'm verbalizing it for the record. So if Mr. McGuckin would like to respond to a concern about representing multiple towns from Shaky Jake, also known as Phil Stilton, if the information is correct that he shared on the chat.
Sure. My firm represents a number of municipalities and land use boards. The partners in our firm and associates, it's pretty much our specialty. It's a good portion of what our firm does. We represent towns and boards throughout Ocean County, Burlington County, Monmouth County, Mercer County, et cetera, and Atlantic County. So that's what we do. I personally do not represent anything in Lakewood. My partner, Jerry Dasty, is a attorney for the zoning board in Lakewood, as well as numerous other towns.
Thank you. Another comment. I do paraphrase some of the questions in here because they're rather lengthy, and I changed them because there's some of them to edit them to make sure they're as accurate as possible, particularly typos and things like that. And then the last follow-up, he's asking how, with the multiple positions, that you can be sure to devote proper time to Jackson, Mr. McGuckin. If you can share an answer to that question, I think that'll close out that comment period on that item.
Sure. The council and mayor and council will decide if I do an adequate job or not. I will serve at their pleasure.
Thank you. Nothing further.
No other comments or questions?
Shaky Jake is saying no. Tom's River specifically is indicating that the meeting time is similar. Same night as Jackson meeting references here.
Respectfully, Mr. Stilton, my schedule, I'm not going to run it through you.
No further items, I don't believe. Thank you.
Can I get a move to close public portion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Move to close the meeting.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Folks, thank you for tonight. Thanks for all the questions, and stay safe. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.